Imagine living for 900 years, not 90, 900 years, watching your great-great-great-great-grandchildren be born while you're still alive, watching entire civilizations grow from nothing while you're still walking the earth. That was normal life between Adam and Noah. There were 10 generations between the first man who ever existed and the man who built the ark. And the stories of those 10 generations, how long they lived, what happened to them, and how the world slowly fell apart around them, is one of the most fascinating and forgotten chapters in all of human history. Let's talk about it. Generation 1. Adam. Let's start at the beginning. Adam, the first human being. Now most people know Adam's story, the garden, the fall, being cast out. But what most people don't think about is what happened after that. Because after Adam left the garden, he didn't just disappear. He lived for 930 years. 930 years. Let that sink in for a second. That's longer than the entire history of the United States multiplied by 4. Adam was alive for nearly 1,000 years. And here's the thing that blew my mind when I first learned this. Adam was still alive when his great-great-great-great-great-grandson Lamech was born, the 9th generation. Adam lived long enough to watch 9 generations of his own descendants be born, grow up, have children, and grow old. He watched humanity multiply from one man and one woman into entire populations spread across the earth. Can you imagine what that felt like? Watching everything unfold, knowing you were responsible for all of it, that you started it all with one choice in a garden. According to Islamic tradition, Adam was also the first prophet, the first person to receive direct guidance from God. He carried that knowledge and passed it down. The story wasn't just his personal history, it was a message he was responsible for transmitting to his children and their children after them. He had Seth when he was 130 years old, and then he lived another 800 years after that. The man watched everything. Generation 2, Seth, the son of Adam and Eve, 912 years old when he died. Now Seth matters more than most people realize, because after Cain killed Abel, the first murder in human history, and Seth was the one who carried the righteous line forward. He was the continuation. Without Seth, none of the rest of the story exists. His name in Hebrew means appointed or placed, because Eve herself said when he was born, God has appointed me another child in place of Abel. There's grief in that name, but also hope. Seth was raised by Adam himself. Think about that. He grew up listening to his father, the man who had literally walked in paradise, who had spoken directly with God, who had seen the garden before the fall, telling him about it. Seth didn't just hear stories. He heard first-hand accounts. His father was there. Adam was 130 years old when Seth was born, and Adam lived another 800 years after that. So Seth and Adam were alive together for 800 years, 800 years of the son learning from the father. Seth had his son Enosh when he was 105 years old and lived to be 912 years old. He outlived Adam by almost 200 years and watched his own grandchildren and great-grandchildren fill the earth. Generation 3, Enosh, son of Seth, grandson of Adam, 905 years old. Here's where things start to get interesting, because Enosh's generation marks a turning point, and depending on which tradition you follow, it's either a positive or a negative one. In the biblical account, in the generation of Enosh, men began to walk with God from birth, and the Lord became their father. A family of faithful children willing to reject the ways of the world. Enosh is described as the first man truly raised in the ways of God by his earthly father. But in some Islamic scholarly traditions, the generation of Enosh is when something else began. The first seeds of people starting to drift. Not dramatically, not all at once, just quietly, slowly, beginning to forget. And that's actually the most dangerous kind of forgetting. Not a sudden rebellion, but a gradual drift. Generation by generation, the message gets a little quieter, the practices a little looser, the memory of the garden a little more distant. Enosh was born when his father Seth was 105 years old and lived to be 905 years old, which means he outlived Adam, Seth, and Enoch and was a contemporary of Noah for 84 years. Think about that, the 3rd generation and the 10th generation, breathing the same air. Generation 4, Kenan, son of Enosh, great-grandson of Adam, 910 years old. He fathered Mahalalel when he was 70 years old. Kenan is one of the quieter figures in this lineage. The historical and religious texts don't give us much specific detail about his life beyond the genealogy, but his existence matters for one simple reason. He kept the line going through nearly 1,000 years of human history when the world was rapidly changing around him. One thing worth noting, based on the biblical timeline, Mahalalel was alive at the same time as Adam for approximately 235 years. Through Kenan, the direct connection to Adam stretched all the way to the 5th generation. The world in Kenan's time was filling up fast. Humanity was spreading. And with that spread came increasing diversity. Different communities, different practices, different ways of life, developing independently across the earth. Generation 5, Mahalalel, son of Kenan. 895 years old. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years. His name means praise of God in Hebrew, and he holds a specific interesting position in this lineage. Mahalalel is the great-great-grandson of Adam and the great-great-grandfather of Enoch, placing him 4 generations before Noah. He was the bridge of the middle generations. By this point, humanity has been on earth for hundreds of years. The world Adam knew is becoming ancient history even within living memory. And yet, because these men lived for 900 years, the chain of direct knowledge still holds. Mahalalel could have spoken to people who spoke to Adam himself. Mahalalel lived until when Noah was 234 years old. So even this 5th generation figure overlapped with Noah, the man who would eventually save humanity from the flood. Generation 6, Jared son of Mahalalel. And here we get one of the longest lifespans in the entire list. Jared lived 962 years. When Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years. 962 years, the second longest lifespan in recorded human history, just behind his own grandson Methuselah. Jared's significance is largely tied to who his son was, because Jared fathered one of the most mysterious and fascinating figures in all of ancient tradition, Enoch, and we'll get to him in a moment. But think about Jared's world. By his time, humanity is multiplying fast, civilizations are forming, and according to various traditions, it's in this period, around the time of Jared, that the great corruption begins to accelerate. The world is becoming something very different from what Adam and Seth knew. Jared watched it all unfold across nearly 1,000 years. He saw his son Enoch become the most righteous man of his generation, and then he saw something happen to his son that had never happened to anyone before and has only happened once since. Generation 7, Enoch or Idris, known in Islamic tradition as Idris. And this is the one that stops everyone. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. He didn't die. In a list where every single other person's entry ends with "and then he died," Enoch's entry ends differently. God simply took him. He was here, and then he wasn't. 365 years old, the shortest lifespan in the entire pre-flood lineage, but also the most remarkable ending of any of them. While everyone else lived 900 years and died, Enoch lived 365 years and was taken directly by God while still alive. In Islamic tradition, Idris is a prophet. He is mentioned twice in the Quran, described as truthful and a prophet, and as having been raised to a high station. Many Islamic scholars believe he was raised to the heavens alive, similar to how Isa is believed to have been raised. And here's a fascinating detail. Enoch's name in Hebrew means dedicated or trained. He was a man so completely dedicated, so completely aligned with the divine, that death itself didn't apply to him the way it applied to everyone else. He also, according to various historical traditions, was the first person to write with a pen, the first to study the stars and mathematics. The man who never died had a son, and that son holds another record entirely. Generation 8, Methuselah, son of Enoch, and the oldest human being ever recorded in any historical or religious tradition. 969 years, nearly 1,000 years of life. This man was born before his father was taken by God, and he outlived his father, his children, and almost everyone he ever knew. And here's the detail that is genuinely mind-blowing once you work out the timeline. Methuselah died in the same year as the flood. The same year. Some calculations put his death right before the floodwaters came. Others suggest he may have died just as they arrived. His very name, Methuselah, is believed by some scholars to mean, "When he dies, it will come, or his death shall bring it," as if his name itself was a prophecy, as if God encoded the warning into the name of the man. The moment Methuselah dies, the flood begins. Whether or not that etymology is accurate is debated, but the timing is not debated. The 10 patriarchs excluding Enoch who preceded the Great Flood lived an average of 912 years. Lamech died the youngest at 777, and Methuselah lived to be the oldest at 969. Methuselah was the grandfather of Noah. He watched his grandson build an ark. He heard Noah preach for decades that the end was coming, and then, right at the moment the rain began, he was gone. Generation 9, Lamech son of Methuselah, father of Noah, 777 years old. He was a righteous man, not to be confused with another man by the same name who was a descendant of Cain, and who murdered 2 human beings out of revenge. 2 men named Lamech in the same era, one a descendant of Cain, violent, boastful, who celebrated killing, one a descendant of Seth, righteous, the father of the man who would save humanity. Same name, completely opposite lives, and that contrast tells you everything about what the world looked like by this point in human history. Two lines of humanity, one that had drifted further and further from the original message, one that had tried to hold on to it, now living side by side in the same world. Noah's father Lamech was 56 years old when Adam died. Let that land. The 9th generation and the 1st generation overlap by 56 years. Adam and Lamech breathed the same air, and Lamech died 5 years before the flood. He didn't have to see it. He didn't have to watch the world end. He died knowing his son was building something that would carry humanity through what was coming. Whether that was mercy or coincidence depends on what you believe. Generation 10, Noah, the 10th generation, and his story, the ark, the flood, what really happened. That deserves its own video entirely, which is exactly what the next video is going to be. What I will tell you is this: by the time Noah arrived, the world Adam knew was completely unrecognizable. 2,000 years of human history had passed, the righteous men were gone one by one, and Noah looked around at what humanity had become and it broke him. 10 generations, nearly 2,000 years, and in those 2,000 years humanity went from one man in a paradise to an entire world, so lost it had to be washed clean and started again. One of them was the first human being. One of them never died. One of them lived longer than anyone in recorded history. One of them had his death written into his name as a prophecy, and one of them built a boat that saved every living thing on earth. 10 men, 2,000 years, one story that still matter.